Hi, and welcome to this week's Mailbox, where I take a look at some of the more interesting comments that have appeared on the channel from the past week or so and go through them, adding in my own thoughts as well. So this week we've had quite a few in terms of with patch 8.1 looming, in terms of the state of BfA, in terms of game philosophy in general, and in terms of the way games, and I suppose in particular PC games, are going well with all gaming studios. But the first thing we do, of course, is deal with the where's the mailbox. So what you have to do, for those who are new to this, is you basically say where you think the mailbox is this week. So last week it was indeed Timbermore Hold. It was on the Fellwood side of it. Someone there trying to hedge their bets. Timbermore Hold in, I think Fellwood looks like it could be the Moonglade side. No, not the Moonglade side. The mushrooms surely are the... or some sort of fungus, or surely the clue there. But it was indeed the Fellwood side. So this week's, for all you Wrath babies, should be an easy one. Very few people got last week's. Very poor. But you need to say where the mailbox is this week. What you do is you say the specific place where I am has a specific name, and also the zone. That's all I need. You don't have to say where within the specific place it is. Just place name, zone name. That'll do me. So, let's go on to a couple of things. Before we get on to some actual comments, though, we have a meaningless milestone. I almost didn't notice this week, but I finally got a video with 1,000 likes. And pleasingly, it's the Retribution Essentials Guide for Battle for Azeroth, the one I put a lot of work into. It always annoys me when I get... videos doing well that are ones that I just did, like one of my normal vlogs that, I didn't even necessarily think a lot about. Some of them I think more about. I mean, if you look at the ones that are sort of bringing up the rear there, Blizzard hint at faction changes in interview. This is just one of my semi-regular ones where I find an article in a magazine where maybe some lesser developers were interviewed and do a video on that, and that just went mad. Lord of the Rings Online one, which continues to be my most viewed video, which is really annoying on what is essentially a World of Warcraft channel. The April Fool's one from last week, that was actually really good. It's actually got my most number of dislikes as well as the fourth number of likes. And then there was the Retribution Paladin Guide, from last expansion. So it's nice that the latest one has done a little bit better. And the damage meters one there. So that was quite good. There was almost another meaningless milestone this week. Very, very nearly another, but not quite. And that is very nearly 5 million views. Since I first started doing the channel as a channel. Now, my channel actually has more than 5 million views, for anyone who might notice that. But that's because the channel existed for years before without me necessarily... you wanting it to find other people. So from the date at which I decided, yes, I'm going to use this channel to actually try and get, as a one of the SEO experts would say, get a message out there, which is the 21st of September 2015, I've now got 5 million views. It's not very good spread over that amount of time, but still nearly another meaningless milestone. So we'll get rid of that one and get on to some actual comments then. So, first one is about storylines. So this is based on the video I did about creating storyline arcs to educate new players in Warcraft lore, because I don't believe that the leveling content does that in any real way. I don't think people can level up in this game and learn about Warcraft lore. So, someone's saying here, I think the Heritage Armor quest lines, currently only Dwarfs and Blood Elves in 8.1, leans a bit into that direction, class-specific storylines, here race-specific. I quite like most of the race storylines. There's like one or two I'm not so keen on. But generally speaking, I quite like them. And they do a reasonable job of explaining something about that race. So from that point of view, it is good. It does a decent job of explaining some Warcraft lore. Unfortunately, they only exist for the purposes of getting us veteran players who already have level capped characters, to get a character from, level 20 as it, well, I mean, if it's the new races, obviously, I suppose it has to be level 1, up to level cap. Because the problem is you can't actually start these off until you've got not only level cap, but done a fair amount of the content as well, because you've got to have reputations. So I don't think it really does a decent job of explaining that lore from that point in terms of getting a new player to do it. But those, and also they're quite limited. But those sorts of ideas of quests, if they did it if they did it for zones, so you have your quests and you do your scenarios and stuff like that, and it takes you through and you learn something from it. If they expanded that, and you could base your leveling experience on that sort of content, then I think that would do a lot more for teaching people about Warcraft lore. And when you've got the scenarios in as well, you could also potentially use it to help players learn more about their class as well, because you could put, the end scenario encounter could actually be quite a difficult one. And now that they've got the smart NPCs, they could even put you in a group situation. I know a lot of people lament, and we'll be talking more about this with some other comments today, lament the idea that people, as they're leveling, because they're just doing easy solo stuff, they're not really learning their class as well as they might. But imagine you had these end scenarios that were actually quite challenging, and for your particular role, the game gave you a party, and smart NPC party that would fulfill the other roles, and you take part as part of that, but nonetheless there's a fair amount of challenge on you to do it, to work within that group. That could help. And it'd have to be the sort of thing where, as I say, don't make it too difficult, but at the same time, it's not essential to finish it either. If someone found it too difficult, they could move on. But that would give them the opportunities to learn sort of abilities that you wouldn't necessarily naturally use when you're just doing your normal solo stuff, and also to use them better. So, but yeah, I think at the moment the heritage armor stuff, it's there as it was for the allied races thing. It's there purely to get us to spend more time in the game. It seems to me to be a frank admission that there's not enough to keep enough people occupied with level cap stuff, so let's get more people leveling through. Even though the leveling experience, I think, for veterans and new players alike, it's not great for a lot of people. Some people love it, but for a lot of people it's not great. That's the problem there. Next one, though. Someone's saying, this is obviously looking ahead to patch 8.1. Players focus too much on the next patch and not try to enjoy the current content. I would say I don't think you're supposed to ever have to try to enjoy something. That phrase, try and enjoy it. You either enjoy something or you don't. If you don't naturally enjoy it. Obviously, people enjoy the game. That's why they play it. So any effort that is necessary to enjoy it is already there. I would say if people are looking forward to the next patch, it's for one of two reasons. Either one, there's something really amazing coming in that patch and they can't wait, like a kid waiting for Christmas. Or they're not enjoying the current stuff, or they feel that they've done with it and they did enjoy it, but now it's over, they're ready for the next bit. But in either case, what you're basically saying is that, relatively speaking, the next patch is something to look forward to compared to with what they're doing now. So, the people who are eagerly anticipating an upcoming patch are essentially those who have not particularly enjoying the current one. You can't blame people for that. People enjoy what they want. And yes, there are some players who want content so more quickly than a game can reasonably give, and that's why you get, it frequently boggles the mind for me, my mind anyway, when I see, you get people who do channels on like just general gaming channels, and it's like they play so many games. You think to yourself, you can hardly play these games at all, surely, because you play so many games. You must be like spending a week or two maximum on any one game to be able to get through the sheer number of games. When I hear, I sometimes watch gaming vloggers at the end of a year, especially, talking about the best games of that year, and the number of games they're listing as just the ones to consider from that best list is so many. It's like 20 or more. You sometimes think, that just means maximum of I can't understand spending so little time on a single game, because I'm completely the opposite. I get a game, I want to play that game. Maybe a couple of others on the side, but generally speaking, one game. The idea of playing a different game every week and, playing a game, when it comes out and then stopping it and then playing another one the next week and just, doing a channel based on that, for some people is amazing. For me, it'd be like, well, I couldn't do that. I don't think I could do it. But those sort of players, of course, are not going to be satisfied. They're going to burn through content really quickly. But then other sorts of players that are more like me, where the content will last a bit longer, if you are eagerly anticipating the next patch, as I say, it's because the current one hasn't done it for you, and it's not really doing it for you. And maybe some of those, and this is potentially why they're rushing it, because maybe some of those players are questioning whether they'd want to play World of Warcraft in the long term or not. But the problem is, of course, if they bring it out before it's really finished, and people become disappointed by that, because that's where you get problems. I mean, probably not for the first time. So I could compare that with Fallout 76. It seems to me one of the main issues with Fallout 76 is not necessarily it's a terrible game. All right, it's been released before it should have been, but that's games now, isn't it? I think it's just that it didn't meet the expectations. And it has to. If you overhype an expansion, a patch, or a game, then you will get much more scathing criticisms of it. You can have a game, it's the same game in, like, say, parallel universes. In one, they overhype it, and people say it's a terrible game. And the other one, you don't. You just basically say what it's going to have in it. And people will just judge it on its merits. It's the overhyping of it that can be a problem. But at the same time, you want to hype it so that you can get as many people as possible paying to play it. So it's a bit of a difficult one. But I would say I don't think you can blame the players. The players will enjoy what they enjoy. If they enjoy the current stuff still, then that's fine. Those players are not hanging on tenterhooks waiting for the next patch. It'll happen when it happens. But for the players who are pretty much done, they want it out as soon as possible. Next one now. Says here, too little too late. This is regarding patch 8.1, of course. Says it's obvious that they've been scrambling since release and the product reflects that flustered hurry. I still play because I'm a filthy casual. You and me, Bev. And zones are super comfy for Alliance. But, oh yeah, I like that word, comfy, because Stormsong Valley, I'd say my favourite place is Stormsong Valley in this game. It's a shame I'm bored. And my favourite part of that zone is the area with the bees. And you've got like honey monsters and stuff like that. It's a lovely place. I love that place. I hate the Quillbore place, though. But I do love the honey monster place with the bees. But anyway, it says, but the idea that things are released unfinished is a dangerous and slippery path. I don't care for it one bit. I like the Shigeru Miyamoto quote. I may be pronouncing that wrong, sorry. I'm not familiar with him. A delayed game is good eventually. A bad game is bad forever. The notion that classes were put on the back burner is insane. It's the most immediate content that any of us experience. It's like releasing a car and say they'll get to the tyres next month. So there's two things in there. One I'm going to agree with, one I'm going to disagree with. So I'll do the agreement first. It is the most immediate content any of us experience. That is what I have always said. Class design, I've always said it is the most difficult thing to get right in a game such as this. But it is also the most crucial. Because different people play this game for different reasons. And people playing this game will do different content. Some people will do a whole smorgasbord of the content. Some people focus on one little aspect of it. For all I know, there are people who only play this game for battle pets. I don't know. That may be true. But what everyone does, absolutely everyone, is play a class. And that is their character. And even if they just do the battle pets thing, they need a character to get up to certain levels to acquire the battle pets. So they still need a class. And they still have to find that class enjoyable, accessible, and with sufficient challenge. So, yes, when you have to frankly acknowledge that a class is not going to be ready and they'll get around to it in 8.1, and this is before BfA had even launched, That's not acceptable. And the problem is it's a consequence of two things for me. One, this notion of redoing classes for an expansion is madness. Absolute madness. And they have to stop it. And I know they would actually get some criticism for this, but they've got to stop. It's a very dangerous cycle. It's a cycle that began with TBC because, you know, the classes in vanilla were a complete shambles. They decided to put some serious effort into them for TBC. But then every expansion since, people are anticipating class changes. And sometimes they do major ones, major rewrites. Sometimes they're not so major. But the first thing I'm ever asked, you know, when I get into the alpha or whatever, is what's this class like? That's what people want to know. And it's not because they're dissatisfied with their class. It's because they expect it. Blizzard have generated this Pavlovian response that when a new expansion is coming out, yeah, new levels, yeah, new zones, fine, whatever. What's my class going to be like? That's what most people are interested in because everyone plays a class. And it's Blizzard's fault for rewriting them for expansions. They shouldn't. What they should do is just get classes so that they work. The game doesn't fundamentally change in terms of what you require your your character to be able to do. So what's required of the classes doesn't fundamentally change all the time. Every now and then, you'd look at a class and you go, okay, this now needs some work. And you do the work on it, and you don't release it until it's ready. You know, but the class as it is still fine. You cannot rewrite a class and then bring it out in an unfinished state because you were committed to redoing that class, which is effectively what happened. And this is where, you know, and they made an extra cock up with Legion, of course, because the artifact system, which, okay, people liked while it was Legion, but given that they're only going to do it for one expansion, this notion they had in their heads that they could just take away the artifacts and the rest of the class would still be fine was a nonsense. Absolute nonsense. They didn't actually understand. And that was the worst part of it. They didn't actually understand the classes. Because you can't come to that conclusion. You cannot possibly say, we take the artifact abilities away and the classes still work fine. You know, and the stupid thing is they realized, you know, 2 weeks into alpha or something, 2 or 3 weeks in. But how they didn't realize when the rest of us did is ridiculous. So anyway, but the thing I'll have to disagree with is you say a delayed game is good eventually, a bad game is bad forever, suggesting that if you bring it out in an unfinished state and it's not really working, that's it, it's screwed forever. I don't believe that, and I think the proof of that is, as I always indicate, Elder Scrolls Online. When that came out, it was bad. The core concepts were decent, but it was very unfinished. And I don't just mean bugs. There were core concepts with the game that also, after a while, don't pan out. The game is now completely different and is amazing. Whereas, or at least for the solo, like all the leveling type stuff, the casual stuff. So, you can rescue a game. You can, and there have been times when it's been done. Didn't Final Fantasy XIV do a similar thing, where it had to reinvent itself because it made a terrible error by releasing a version that wasn't great, or something like one of the Final Fantasies, I'm sure. But you can rescue it, but to rescue it, you have to realise, to rescue any situation in life, you have to realise where you went wrong. And you have to then work out what to do to put it right. And I think that far too often with World of Warcraft, they don't even realise where they went wrong. They know that people... Do you know what it's like? It always reminds me, there was a Kitchen Nightmares, one of the American ones, which I always really hate watching, because it's like, you watch the Kitchen Nightmares and the British ones, he just goes in, they're making an arse of it, he tells them they're making an arse of it, and he tells them what they need to put it right. And then they either do or they don't. In the American one, it's all drama. But there's one particular one where he goes in and he says to the manager, what is wrong with this restaurant? And she says, there's not enough customers. And he looks at her like, what? And then he said, Why is that? And she just says, we just don't have enough customers. And that's, that's what, like, this person didn't understand what was wrong. She didn't see that there was anything wrong with the restaurant. She just knew that customers weren't coming in. And it's she was blaming the customers, in other words. And it's a bit like that with World of Warcraft. They know that the players are attacking it, but they don't really understand why. They just think that they're attacking it, and so they do something to try and placate them. But because they don't really understand what it was they did wrong, they're going to keep doing it. And they're not going to be able to identify a solution because they don't even acknowledge that there's a problem. The problem is that people are attacking it, or people are unsubbing, or whatever. The problem as they see it is entirely on the players. They see the players as a problem. They don't see what they're doing as a problem. That's how I see it anyway. But you can absolutely rescue it if you do see the problem. Anyway, next one. It says, so this is about, whether they should be announcing release dates as far ahead as they are, because they didn't used to. And now they are. I think it's a bad thing. But anyway, it says if they didn't announce the release date, the apathy would be even higher because we wouldn't even know when the next thing is coming. I'm not sure about that. I mean, for some people it may be. The thing is, it's a bit like with BfA. Once they announced the release date, and they announced it a good 4 months ahead of time, which is not... Well, they did the same in Legion, but it wasn't the case in expansions before that. That was always 2 months' notice. Because basically they announced it when it was ready. But they had to give 2 months' notice for, logistics. Especially in the time when there were physical CDs, DVDs needed. Because they'd have to be distributed. But anyway, so for this particular... What I would say is, so as soon as they announced the actual release date, then as it approached, people are looking at the state of things and going, it's not really ready, is it? It's not really ready. Now, 4 months ahead of time, people can just say, well, it's still beta, they're still improving it. Fine. Once it gets to a month away, some people still say that, but then everyone else is looking at it and saying, yeah, but there's an awful lot of things. There's a hell of a list of things that's not ready. A month away. Then it gets to 2 weeks away, and there's still a hell of a lot of things. And then Blizzard starts saying, yeah, this thing isn't going to be ready. This isn't going to be ready. This isn't going to be ready. Yeah, that's not going to be quite ready. I mean, I was concerned when months and months before release, when it was still alpha, in fact, they said that they didn't really know what to do with islands. That shocks the hell out of me. Because that is their expansion-defining content. You might not believe it, but if you think about it, what is there in BfA in terms of new types of content? Now, remember, I mean, you may not know. I'm not someone who thinks there needs to be new types of content for an expansion. For me, an expansion is just that. The game expands. You get new zones, you get new quests, new storyline, that sort of thing. That'll do me. That's an expansion for me, right? If you're going to do anything else, like introduce some new technology to do a new type of content, fantastic, great. It's not essential. It's not essential for my enjoyment. But Blizzard do that, along with having to change classes, which sometimes they do it in a major way, sometimes a minor way, but they always do it because it's now expected. They always want to bring in something new as well. And islands are the new thing. Nothing else is. Warfronts isn't really that. I mean, you're not going to pin your hopes on the success of an expansion on Warfronts, are you? Some people enjoy them, but there's nothing to them. But islands is the thing. But they didn't know what to do with them. They had this idea, technology-driven idea, but the creative side of things didn't know what to do with it. They said as much. And even quite close to release, they were trying to, in a Q&A, when asked the question, how are you going to make this relevant throughout the expansion? Their answer was, we don't know. They didn't know. So that was quite bad. But my point is, as soon as you announce it, and it's the same with the patch 8.1, right? We're now in a situation, if they don't announce it until like a week or two before, we still wouldn't know. Let's say it was still coming out on the 11th. We still may not know. They may not have announced it just yet. They'd be getting roundabout ready to. So up until this point, people who feel that their class still needs attention would still be able to think, it's just low down on the list, it's coming. Whereas now they know that's not the case. They know it's coming out in just over a week's time. And they know that it's, however it is currently on the PTR, it's almost certainly how it's going to be, unless there's a last minute build. And then if there is a last minute build, even then it's like, well, there's no time to test it anymore. So it's just going to go like that. So either they don't get the changes that they're expecting, or they don't get those changes tested. Those two things are now certain. So it probably increases players' level of anxiety, because like I said before, the class is the most important thing. And if people if they don't feel that their class, and I know there's plenty of people who will never feel that their class is competitive. You know, these ones who go on a forum, every other class in the game is overpowered and they're really weak, when in actual fact they're just bad players. You know, and it's, and the sort of players will keep changing classes. Oh no, it's not me that's the problem. It's the class. It must be the class. I need to play the class. Oh, that class is doing really well. I'll play that class. Then they play that class and they go, no, this class is shit. Can't be me. Must be the class. You always get those sort of people. But when there are actual issues with it, and you now know it wasn't ready for 8.0, and now it's not even going to be ready for 8.1. So, you know, which is worth a little bit of apathy or actual anxiety. I don't know. Next one. So it says, Blizzard are clearly trying to put out fires. They ignored player feedback in alpha and beta. Now they're trying to tempt people back. In my opinion, players will happily wait for a decent product. Some players, yes. But I do not think that the majority do. Because if the majority of players... This is the irony. This is the hideous irony of the world. If everyone acted in their own self-interest, the world would be a much better place. And this is as true in life as it is in this game, or in any game. Players ultimately act against their self-interest by advance ordering games. That is why in January of this year's World of Warcraft did a special Q&A, and we thought we were going to learn lots about Battle for Azeroth. Did we? No. What we found out was, Allied racers, if you pre-order this game, at the time there wasn't even, you just knew it was going to be coming out by the 21st of September. So, right, 9 months away. You know, if you get this game potentially 9 months, pay for it 9 months before you can play it, we'll let you have a Void Elf. You know, that was ultimately it. Quite why so many Horde players bought it, I cannot imagine. You know, that their choice was, you know, a Tauren, but with different coloured or different shaped antlers, or a Nightborn, which is a type of elf, which looks like it's got the most foul-smelling fart following it around. But from the Alliance players' point of view, we've got like Forged Draenei, and we got, you know, Void Elves, which are really popular. And I suppose Horde, if they like their, you know, Raptor mount, maybe. But nonetheless, the point is that they did this specifically to grab the money early. Now, okay, the fact that World of Warcraft is also a subscription-based game means that it's not like one, you know, you buy it and that's it type games, because those just want all the money up front. They just want the money up front. And then at that point, what motivation is there for them to release it in a great state? There isn't. They'll release it ASAP. And then, I mean, this is now a hideous cycle in the wider gaming industry. We've been spoilt a little bit as Blizzard game players, but, you know, maybe BfA isn't an aberration. Maybe it's just now the way it's going to go, where, you know, you do your advance orders, rake in a load of money. Then you bring a game out in an unfinished state. Maybe that's why they announce these things so far ahead, because it's not because they think they can get it done by then. It's just they just don't care. They will accept release it in an unfinished state, because then what they can do, they've already got the money off a load of people. Then what they can do is they can say, right, and sorry, I keep going off on a tangent. The further back you get them to make the pre-order, the better, because it's then less likely they'll be able to have a refund, unless the game is just straight up not working. BfA, you can't really say was straight up not working. It was. It's just there were things about it that weren't finished. But it's largely, you know, matter of opinion whether a class is finished or not. is a matter of opinion, and the same thing with other bits of content. It's not like it was rife with bugs. There have been bugs, and there have been more bugs than is traditionally the case. You know, it's not hideous. So you get your pre-orders in nice and early, then that comes out. Then you bring it out in your unfinished state. Then you promise improvements. Well, that keeps people hanging on. I mean, obviously not with some people, but some people is, all right, well, they're going to fix it. I'll keep playing. And then they bring some fixes out, but it's not really what you were expecting. But then they promise more fixes. They just keep promising and promising and promising and promising. And you know, and that just seems to be how it goes. So like this idea about, but if people just didn't pre-order, if people just, when the pre-order things came out, said, no, I think I'll wait for the game to release if you don't mind. Oh, the game's not finished? I'll wait for you to finish it. If all players did that, or even the vast majority of players did that, the games would be released in a finished state. So we act against our own self-interest because we get tempted by the pre-orders, we buy the pre-orders, and then we don't end up liking the game because it's released unfinished. They overhyped it. You know, it didn't bring us what we expected. And that's just what's happening with games in general. I think that's why a lot of games are getting slated. Some of the games that are getting slated are not necessarily bad games. They just overhyped it. They said you were getting one thing and you got another. And I think the same was the case with BfA. Next one. Right, so someone's saying here, ironic, someone in comments said they could reskin islands for vanilla WoW type content. Back in vanilla WoW, the Islands Legion BfA were worked on to be the next pirate seafaring expansion. It was dumped and went with TBC. So as a joke, we sailed across the ocean between two major zones and discover one, then discover two others. It makes more sense if the three islands were one expansion as it was planned. The battles on the isles lead to Northrend being discovered and Pandaria later, or vice versa. Yeah, from a geological point of view, I meant to say geographical. I don't know why I said geological. It's all rocks, doesn't matter. Then, yeah, that could well be true. But TBC, I think, had to be the first expansion, and Wrath of the Lich King had to be the second. It had nothing to do with how we might naturally... I mean, I don't think discover is the correct word because we always knew they were there, but rediscover, shall we say, go to these places. Because, and I don't think it's too much of a coincidence that the reason why TBC and Wrath were super popular and then some popularity declined, and there's all sorts of reasons people come up with, and in reality there's quite a lot of reasons for it. But ultimately, Illidan and Arthas were the most popular heroes, anti-heroes, villains type characters in Warcraft, in the whole Warcraft series. I mean, obviously they popped up in Warcraft 3, but in the whole Warcraft series before World of Warcraft. Stunningly popular. The stories were very, very popular. Lots of people were excited to see, you know, them being concluded. So they had to go with Illidan and Arthas. I mean, they could have done those the other way around, but it had to be those two for the first two expansions. Because you don't, you know, especially in a game, like, first of all, Blizzard was saying that they weren't even sure it would go for an expansion. They were blown away by the popularity of it. So in a situation like that, you don't, obviously, with hindsight, you can get a bit cocky and go, yeah, we can bring whatever. But at the time, you have to go with what you think is going to be your best storyline for an expansion. And then the next expansion, what you think is your best one left. And keep going like that. You can't really say, I'll tell you what, we'll bring out a couple of expansions, then we'll bring Illidan back. Because that's just cocky. You know, you might not get that third expansion, in which case you've blown it. So I think it always had to be Burning Crusade and Wrath as the following two in whichever order. Had to be Illidan, had to be Arthas. Had to be. Despite the fact that doing a world tour for the expansions may well have made more sense from that point of view, and going to another planet may have made more sense doing it much later on. But, you know, just those stories, they were just unbelievably popular. And there was still a hell of a lot of World of Warcraft players that were coming into the game that were Warcraft players beforehand. Next one, mobile gaming growth. Because personally, I think the big money's been made in mobile. Not all these companies jumping in now can be successful unless the mobile market grows even more than it has. And it's slowed recently. It hasn't. It hasn't slowed. And, it depends how you're trying to, define growth. If you're defining it based on a percentage growth compared to the previous year, then of course it's slowed. It can't do anything else. We had 1 year when there were no mobile games. And then there was a year when there were mobile games. Well, the growth then was infinity. So obviously after that, it's got, you can have massive growth and it's still got to get less and less each time. But you have to be very, very careful when you're looking at percentage growth. It's a bit like profit. An idea would be, so let's say you were given a choice by your rich Uncle Tony who said, right, I'm going to give you one of my businesses. Do you want the business that makes a 5% profit, or do you want the business that makes a 40% profit? And you go, I'll have the one that makes a 40% profit. Well, there you go. But then let's say that 40% profit business is one that has an annual turnover of £100,000, and the 5% profit industry is the one that has a turnover of £20 billion a year. Well, in actual fact, you've now just chosen the stupid one. And it's the same thing there. The mobile market is growing. And the other thing I would point out is that there's potentially still a lot of people that don't yet have phones that are brilliant for gaming. Now, there's plenty of people that, get the latest model, stuff like that. But it's relatively small number. Most of us just want a phone for whatever. I got this, my second smartphone. This isn't amazing. I got this because it was cheap. The first smartphone I got because I needed a phone, and it was cheap. By the time I got that, and it wasn't that long ago, only a few years ago, smartphones were just normally the thing. Then, after 2 or 3 years, it didn't have enough memory, so I needed one with more memory. So I got this, and it cost me 80 quid, which, if you're in America, that's just over $100. I didn't go in there thinking, oh, what features has this got? I thought, is this a phone with this amount of memory because I have this amount of memory worth of apps I want to put onto it? Yes, it does. I'll have the cheapest option of that, please. There's plenty of people like that, but as time goes on and new generations of phones come out, the average performance capable of even people's phones who don't want to spend a lot of money on phones is going to increase, and that's then more people who'd be able to potentially play these games. But the fact is, it is growing. It is still growing very significantly. It's hoping against hope to suppose that the mobile market will just fizzle out. There's no reason for it to. There's no hypothesis that can lead to that. As technology improves, eventually games are going to be put onto it, and people are going to play those games. People who don't traditionally buy, they don't have room or the money to buy an expensive PC. Some of those people wouldn't even have the room or the money to buy a console, which is significantly cheaper than even a basic gaming PC. And, but everyone will have a phone. And as phones become better as well and have more and more features, perhaps even people who don't really even bother with phones at the moment eventually will, because it'll be able to do so many amazing things. We think they're amazing now compared to when I grew up. But, how much more in 10, 20 years' time? And again, as more people get them, they'll start to then try out things that they weren't that bothered about. But, well, the phone can do it anyway. I might as well give it a go. And then there's a few of those people enjoy it. And it grows and grows again. Next one. So it says, as far as changing the old content for leveling to incorporate reduced time but increase story immersion, not even immersion, but having stories splashed in your face, I had an idea. If you have done the quest during BfA on the Horde side where they go to the other continent and are trying to learn a little bit about what's going on in Tiragard Sound, they employed a quest mechanic not normally used in WoW, which was to have little translucent yellow phantom copies of a character knelt down behind a barrel or leaning next to a wall, or otherwise suggesting a place where you should go stand and be able to hear conversations or listen in on activity going on. So you would find these vantage points, and as soon as you're there, then events happened which taught you what was going on in the area. If the new player experience incorporated this mechanic in the old zones where you don't have to spend 4 hours doing the entire Westfall questing arc, but it could give you some Bronze Dragon Flight quest to solve some story puzzles, explore the zone to find a handful of locations where a yellow phantom character is situated. That might get lost in Westfall because Westfall is very yellow. and that you could stand and have a relatively short in-game animations where the result is that you learn what happened there in the story. I don't think that's a good idea because it's passive. The point of a role-playing game is that events are supposed to revolve around your character. If you're just learning it passively, that is not good. You've even got to bear in mind, a lot of cinematics, in-game cinematics, feature you. Many of them are all right, based on dialogue of other characters and stuff like that. But quite a lot of them still feature your character because you're in it. You're driving it all. You can't just earwig in. I mean, the vanilla equivalent of doing this was all the little books you could find. They don't really do that anymore. But you had these little books that told you something about the lore of whatever. But that's passive. Only so many people would do that. People want to learn by being involved in the quests where you do learn it. And we have the Bronze Dragons as a way to do past events, to have past events centered around us. I'm not just saying like Caverns of Time type dungeons, but we can go to a particular zone in the past. They could put it in, and we could relive older stories. But they need to be centered around the character. Otherwise, it's just passive. It's like reading a book. The whole the storytelling purpose of a role-playing game is that you are playing a central character. In fact, the central character. Really. Next one. Oh, get rid of that. It says, as long as they make the experience an interesting and class unique, the leveling experience will feel more compelling and engrossing. They'll never do that. We already went through the reasons for that. They will never do it. It says, Star Wars: The Old Republic breathed more life into the game with its own class-specific quests, with the optional generic quests. Yes, but like I already said, they stopped that. Even Star Wars: The Old Republic pretty much stopped doing that. Because it's so resource-intensive, and most players don't experience it all. They don't like the idea of having a load of quests that players are not going to see. And that's the problem with class quests. They should keep them. They should have class-unique stuff. But I keep saying that the best way to do that, and I think other people have said it, that's a view that put the idea in my head in the first place, is to do content that gives you a class reward, like a new spell animation. In fact, I was talking about this yesterday. We were talking about it in the Paladin Discord. Basically, like, for example, they changed the spell animation, not for the first time, for a particular Paladin ability in the PTR. It's changed back to the old one now, because some people didn't like it. Well, what if, instead of just saying, right, we're getting rid of the old animation, here's the new one, they just release the new one as a glyph or some option. Like, it could even be in your a separate transmog type tab, whereas instead of for gear, it's for spells. You've got a choice of 3 different versions of this spell. Which one would you like? But to unlock them, do bits of content. You don't have to create any new content. It could be content that already exists, like an achievement or something, and just do that. But they're never going to do fully involved, immersive class arcs because, like Blizzard have already said, they regret doing what they did in Legion. And Legion wasn't exactly, a lot. But whatever they did in Legion, they regretted it. But then the next point, this is the point where I really put this in for. It says, but to be honest, Blizzard are only listening to us now because they are in dire straits, otherwise they'd continue ignoring us. Are they listening to us now? This is the question I keep rolling around in my head, because every now and then, because it's like, there was a time I thought to myself, yeah, okay, they've now started listening, because, I don't know, the shock of losing a load of subs or whatever, they've now started listening. But I thought, well, are they? And then someone said something to me, I think it was on Friday, and I looked back and I went, oh, yeah. If you look at blue, like, for example, you get blue trackers on MMO Champion, WoW, stuff like that. So, when Blizzard say things, if you missed out on it, you can sort of read through there. And they highlight ones on forums, ones on tweets, stuff like that. It's an excellent resource for looking at the sort of things Blizzard are saying. So when I looked at the blue tracker, and this was for the forums, so EU and NA, but developers never say anything on EU forums. During the whole of November, have a little think about how many developer posts you think there were in the whole of November. And bearing in mind a developer post could just include them saying something, not taking part in a discussion. Because if you're listening to someone, you need a discussion. There was none. Not one. Not a single developer post. And I know some people might say, oh, it's the community managers that are supposed to do all that. No, they're not. Yes, when ideas come up, they're supposed to take them back and stuff like that, and then pass information back. But that's not a discussion. That's like dev-splaining, telling us, yeah, you don't understand it. Let me explain it to you. This is why we're doing it this way. But anyway, even that hasn't really been happening. There's actually not been that many community manager discussion like posts, and what few there have generally been about like forum management, or one thing that often CMs do as part of their job as PR for the company. I suppose they have to, but it's just pointless. Is where someone's saying, "Oh, I don't like this," and then they go, "Oh, actually, I quite like that piece of content." In all honesty, and they always say that. You never hear a CM go, "Yeah, I don't like that either." So, but there hasn't yet in the whole of November. Remember, the previous month is where supposedly we thought they'd started to listen, because they went from, let's say on the Azeroth issue, went from saying, no, it has to be like this, has to be like this, has to be like this. Oh yeah, your idea that you want, no, we're not doing that. To like a couple of weeks later, yeah, so we're listening to what you're saying and we now agree. Well, in fact, they didn't say we now agree, they just said they agree, even though 2 weeks before they were saying they disagree. But anyway, so it looked like they were listening. But the fact that since then, since BlizzCon, there has been 0 posts. Because that's what you do. And you think about all the developers that there are. All of the developers. Not a single one has posted on the official forums to take part in the discussion. And like I say, I don't expect developers to be reading through all these threads. I haven't got time. The CMs have time for that. And they are supposed to remember, as part of their job, flag interesting discussions to the developers. Now, yes, every now and then, if a developer just needs to explain something, they can pass that message back and a CM can say that. But there's been precious little of that in November as well. But ultimately, if there's something that's actually interesting and worthy of discussion, the developer themselves should go on the forum and go, okay, this is what you seem to be saying, this is where we're coming from, blah, 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 and pose a question to like get the discussion going into fruitful areas. Doesn't happen. They just take the view that we don't know what we're talking about. And that's what I mean, coming back to what I was saying earlier. They refuse to accept that there is a problem other than with the player base. That all the problems with World of Warcraft are entirely down to the players. It's like that restaurant manager going, what's the problem with your restaurant? We don't have enough customers. Anyway. Says they only care about the player base when they're in crisis and risk losing much business and money. Well, to be fair, as they should be. They're a business. Of course they should care about the business. They didn't care about the business, they'd give the game away for free and then go out of business. Of course they have to care about the business. But the way you care about the business is by caring about the customers. And I'm not convinced that happens. Because they don't talk to the customers. They have very obvious forums for doing so, and they don't do it. Anyway, last one. So it says, are Blizzard making a mistake? They didn't do any good stuff in this expansion. Well, that's a bit harsh. It says I'm going to change a few words. It says they buggered it now. I got the Blizzard's logic. WoD was poor. They didn't put any effort in, and they saved up money, and Legion was awesome, at least for most of the players. Now, BfA is going to be poor. Why? Well, they have to save money for the next expansion. Do you remember the joke in case expansion fails, break the ice, that the next expansion, it sounds like blah, 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 blah. No. That's not what's happening at all. And I'm not saying that they won't... Right. The thing with Legion, I've said this before, the thing with Legion, it had an unprecedented level of resources. And the reason for this is because years ago, the powers that be, this is not the developer's idea as far as I can tell, and I really don't think it would be, the powers that be said, we need you. They identified that obviously sub numbers keep dipping, going up and down, up and down, up and down. The hardcore players are obviously going to sub every month. Everyone else doesn't. There's lots of casual players that might only sub a few months in the year. So they're getting, and if you think about the cost of an expansion, that costs about as much as, what, 4 or 5? I suppose it depends on what version of the get, whether it's limited, the sort of collector's edition or what. But let's say 3 or 4 months worth of subs. So they looked at this and said, we get about 3 or 4 months worth of subs just from the expansion. And look how many people buy the expansion. Loads of people buy the expansion. What we need is an expansion every year. They said to Blizzard, they said to the developers that work for Blizzard, we want an expansion every year. That's how we're going to make our money. Expansion every year. So the developers try this. Obviously, the way World of Warcraft works, you can't actually do that. Some MMOs can, because there isn't actually that much with an expansion. But Blizzard, they do it differently, and with World of Warcraft. So it wasn't feasible. But they had to, they had to implement it. So the way they did it is they developed 2 in parallel. Legion and Warlords of Draenor. They were supposed to decide which one would actually come out first to tie in with the film. So Warlords of Draenor was the one that most tied with the film. But then the film got put back after they committed to Warlords of Draenor. But the point is that when they began production of Warlords of Draenor, they also began with another team production of Legion. So in terms of Legion development, it had the entirety of Missa Pandaria, along with WoD, and the entirety of Warlords of Draenor as well. It had 2 expansions worth of time worth of development. And then, of course, when you consider that in Warlords of Draenor, there came a point where they decided to cut their losses with it. They decided that they couldn't rescue it and that they'd be far better just pouring all those resources into making sure that Legion was extra good. So not only did Legion get 2 expansions worth of time, it got a load of Warlords of Draenor's resources as well. So it comes as no surprise that Battle for Azeroth, which just got a normal amount, they've now abandoned this 1 expansion a year, but it's still just got a normal expansion's worth of resources, which is obviously they've been thinking about it before, but they started in earnest developing it when Legion came out. That's what they said. They said that. It's not my words. As soon as Legion came out, that's when they began really working on BfA. Which means that now that BfA has been launched, they are now working on Revenge of the Potato People, the next expansion. So the next expansion is not going to get loads of resources like Legion did. Nothing is going to. No expansion is ever going to get that. And in fact, what I would say is if you do not enjoy Battle for Azeroth, if you don't enjoy it, you are, I can guarantee, not going to enjoy the next expansion. And I'll give several reasons for this. So 1, it's not going to get any extra resources because it's going to get the same it's going to get no more than BfA have got. But there are a couple of areas where the next expansion may get even less than BfA. 1, BfA is clearly not working. So the developers are now having to not only put right what went wrong, quantum leap there. But anyway, they're not only having to put right what is wrong, they're also having to do the expected amount of development for the content that is still to come. Ultimately, you cannot expect the developers to do all that. So the fear is, or at least the possibility exists, that maybe they'll take some people off Revenge of the Potato People to put it into BfA, because I don't think they're going to abandon BfA like they did WoD. That would be very bad. And it wouldn't necessarily make the next expansion that much better. So maybe they'll take a bit off that. That then means that there's now fewer people working on the next expansion. And then the other thing is this, as people have already pointed out, there's quite a number of Blizzard's most creative developers and best regarded developers. I'm not saying all, but a smattering, that have been yanked off World of Warcraft for the mobile game. Warcraft go. So we've not only in financial terms going to have nowhere near the resources that Legion had. We're doing it with the next expansion is also going to have way fewer, potentially fewer even than BfA, and also it's not necessarily even got the best quality developers working on it. Without wanting to disrespect some developers on World of Warcraft who may be absolutely top of their game, but if you've had even some of your best developers yanked away, that means the overall quality of your development team as a whole is not as strong. So if people are thinking that it's going to alternate between strong expansion and weak expansion, it's not. If you don't, I'm going to say that I'm convinced that the only way you're going to like the next expansion is if you like BfA. You might be like me. You might be someone who likes BfA. They just expected more, or at least wishes it were better. I know it could have been better if they'd have made better decisions, if they organised themselves better. I know that the expansion could have been better. But that doesn't mean to say that I think it's a bad expansion. I don't. But if you do, you are going to think the next one is bad as well. Maybe even worse. And that's it for this week. That's the mailbox for this week. So thanks very much for all your comments. Keep them coming. Next week, I suppose, unless something disastrous happens, we will have made 5 million views. But keep those views coming as well. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for further content, share with others who may also be interested and would like to subscribe, and comment down below, of course. Say where you think the mailbox is. And until next time, I'll see you later.